Hello, Namaskar. With this hope that my voice is reaching to you, let's begin chapter 4 of Freedom from the Known by J.Krishnamurti. So, the question is, we are all engaged in the pursuit of happiness. It is very structure of our society. But what if this constant demand for pleasure is the very thing that inevitably brings us pain, frustration, sorrow, and fear? So let us look together at this structure and find out if there is something entirely different, a state of joy. So JK says, we said in the last chapter, we said in the last chapter that joy was something entirely different from pleasure. So let us find out what is involved in pleasure and whether it is at all possible to live in a world that doesn't contain pleasure, but a tremendous sense of joy, of bliss. So, finally, JK is pointing out that in place of pleasure, which is the external thing, which is coming from the outside, now we have to understand and we want to be drenched in the real sense of joy, which is coming from inside. We all we are all engaged in the pursuit of pleasure in some form or other, intellectual, sensuous, or cultural pleasure. The pleasure of reforming, telling others what to do, of modifying the evil of society, of doing good, the pleasure of greater knowledge, greater physical satisfaction, greater experience, greater understanding of life, all the clever, cunning things of the mind, and the ultimate pleasure is, of course, to have God. So JK here is pointing out very important and subtle thing, like having the sense of God means having the sense of understanding. I know God, like this sort of things. Having sense of knowledge. It may be having the sense of satisfaction. It may be physical and or mental. The sense of cultural, having the pride of culture. This is also bringing the pleasure. So JK is saying that we are always engaged in pursuit of pleasure in these forms. And all these forms of pleasure are coming from outside. So pleasure is the structure of society. From childhood until death, we are secretly, cunningly, or obviously pursuing pleasure. Now, why from our childhood, JK here is pointing out? Like, for example, since your childhood, see, we have been get into the schools and in education system with this sense that you will just study hard, you will get good marks, you will be first or second, you will be topper in in your school or in class, and this will bring the appreciation from parents, from family, from society, from teachers, from schools, and this will bring the pleasure. And if you are not doing that well, it's mean you don't have right to be happy. So since our childhood, it has been put inside us very deeply that if we'll perform the best, then the pleasure is ours. Otherwise, we are here to suffer. And because of this, the student life is so frustrating. You can understand this thing. It's so frustrating because definitely if there are 100 boys, 100 students in a class, definitely not all of them are going to be the toppers. What about the rest? We are not talking about here. We are not talking those things. So what to do with the rest of the students? How to make them happy? How to give them pleasure? And because of this, all those backbenchers, which is usually used as a derogatory word, those backbenchers try to find out different way to get that pleasure because they are not getting that pleasure which are being accessed by the topper of the school or the class. So they indulge in bad habits out of the class. Try to understand this thing. They are only searching the pleasure part. So whatever our form of pleasure is, I think we should be very clear about it because it is going to guide and shape our lives. It is therefore important for each one of us to investigate closely, hesitantly, and delicately this question of pleasure For to find pleasure and then nourish and sustain it is a basic demand of life, and without it, existence becomes dull, stupid, and lonely and meaningless. So here, this question, like for example, nourish and sustain it is a basic demand of life. This to find the pleasure is a basic demand of life, and without it, existence becomes dull, stupid, and lonely and meaningless. You may ask, why then should life not be guided by pleasure? Why? Because if we are saying that without the existence of pleasure in our life, life becomes dull, stupid, lonely, and meaningless, then why we should question it? That pleasure is guiding our life. What's the problem here? So the problem is, for the very simple reason that pleasure must bring pain, frustration, sorrow, and fear. And out of fear, violence. If you want to live that way, live that way. Most of the world does. Anyway, but if you want to be free from sorrow, you must understand the whole structure of pleasure. So now here, if you'll also read Srimad Bhagavad Gita, if you'll understand chapter 2, there also Krishna is mentioning this thing, that the pleasure is bringing the pain inside you. Because everything, try to understand, what we call sukh and dukh, these are the creation of mind. Pleasure is coming from outside, pain is coming from outside, but the sukh, the sense of, means we are thinking that this pleasure which is coming from outside is giving me the happiness inside us, which is wrong. The pain which is coming from outside giving me the sorrowness inside me, that is wrong. This happiness and this sorrowness has been created by us by enjoying the pleasure and the pain. So here JK is pointing out why we should not be guided by the pleasure. The reason is simple, because pleasure must bring pain and frustration and sorrow. Because every pleasure, pain is associated. How? In the light of Gita, Bhagavad Gita, I will just add 2 or 3 lines. Suppose that you earned some money this month. You are a businessman and you earned 5 lakhs rupees this month. That was an amazing business for you. But with this pleasure, this is giving you pleasure, definitely. Happiness, you are associating your happiness with this pleasure. No problem till here. Now what happens? With this amazing business this month, you have associated your happiness with this sort of pleasure. That if this phenomena happens again, I will feel happiness. But you know the life is not moving the way you are thinking. At that time, suppose in the next month, you are earning only 2 lakh or 1 lakh, or there is loss in your business. As your mind has been associating your happiness with that good business, now your mind is definitely automatically creating sorrowness because your business is not doing that well comparison to the previous one. So with every pleasure, pain is inevitable. You believe it or not, you accept it or not. But if you look it carefully in your life, anyone can see in your life that this is the dual thing which is happening in our life. Every pleasure is bringing a pain associated with it, I will say. So, to understand pleasure is not a deny it. We are not condemning it or saying it is right or wrong. And try to understand, we are not denying the pleasure part. We are not saying that it is right or wrong. It's not the question. But if we pursue it, let us do so with our eyes open, knowing that a mind that is all the time seeking pleasure must inevitably find its shadow, pain. They cannot be separated, although we run after pleasure and try to avoid pain. So this is the thing that even Bhagavad Gita is teaching. So try to understand. Here JK is saying that we are not denying the pleasure. Means we are not judging it, because in the chapter 3, JK was already saying that we don't have to judge anything, what is right, what is wrong. So here we are not judging pleasure, that it's right, that's why we should go for it, it's wrong, that's why we shouldn't go for it. It's not the question here. The question is, if you are pursuing for the pleasure, if you want that pleasure, then you should be aware of that thing. Okay, this is going to bring pain as its shadow. You should be aware of that thing. You should be ready for that thing. This is very important. You should have eye opened. Eye open means you need to be awakened. Like for example, in Hindi we say jagrit hokar. At that time there is no problem. So JK further says, now why is the mind always demanding pleasure? Why is it that we do noble and uh, ignoble things with the undercurrent of pleasure? Again, let us let us read these lines. Now, why is the time always? Why is the mind always demanding pleasure? Why is it that we do noble and ignoble things with the undercurrent of pleasure? Why is it we sacrifice and suffer on the thin thread of pleasure? Why is it pleasure, and how does it come into being? I wonder if any one of you have asked yourself these questions and followed the answer to your very end. So question here is, why our mind always demanding for the pleasure? This is the question. Pleasure comes into being through four stages: perception, sensation, contact, and desire. Perception, sensation, contact, and desire. I see a beautiful motor car, say, then I get a sensation, a reaction from looking at it. Then I touch it or imagine touching it. And then there is a desire to own and show myself off in it. Or I see a lovely cloud or a mountain clear against the sky, or a leaf that has just come in springtime, or a deep valley full of loveliness and splendor, or a glorious sunset, or a beautiful face, intelligent, alive, not self conscious, and therefore no longer beautiful. I look at these things with intense delight and I observe them. There is no observer, but only sheer beauty like love. So here, this thing, try to understand these lines. I see a beautiful motor car and say that I get a sensation, a reaction from looking at it, and then I touch it or imagine touching it, and then there is a desire to own it. Or I see a lovely cloud or mountain against the sky and leaf that has just come in springtime, or a deep valley of full of loveliness and splendor, or a glorious sunset and beautiful face, intelligent, alive, not self-conscious, and therefore no longer beautiful. For a moment, I am absent with all my problems, anxieties, and miseries. There is only that marvelous thing. I can look at it with joy, and next moment I forget it. Or else the mind steps in, and then the problem begins. My mind thinks over what it has seen and thinks how beautiful it was. I see myself, I should like to see it again many times. Thought begins to compare, judge, and say, I must have it again tomorrow. The continuity of an experience that has given delight for a second is sustained by thoughts. So again I'm here I'm trying to point out, I will point out that if you read Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, the Sankhya Yoga, which is also called Gyan Yoga, you will see the same thing what JK here is pointing out. I will say. Why? Because JK here is saying that if I see a beautiful thing once, it gives me the pleasure or whatever things that I am associating myself with. At that time, till now there is no problem. But then mind gets into and it get attached to that beautiful thing, and now the mind is desiring, now the desires are coming up. Now that because of that desire my mind is saying that I need it again and again, I want it again and again, I want to possess it, so that that pleasure that I just experienced for a moment, I want to experience that pleasure again and again. And these all things are being done by your desires. And here it gives pain and opportunity to come into your life. It is the same, it is the same, it is the same with sexual desire or any other form of desire. There is nothing wrong with desire. To react is perfectly normal. If you stick a pin in me, I shall react unless I am paralyzed. But then I but then thought steps in and chew over the delight and turn it into pleasure. Thoughts want to repeat the experience. And the more you repeat, the more mechanical it becomes. The more you think about it, the more strength though gives to pleasure. So thought creates and sustains pleasure through desires and gives it continuity, and therefore the natural reaction of desire to any beautiful thing is perverted by thoughts. Thought turns it into a memory, and memory is then nourished by thinking about it over and over again. So any pleasurous thing that you experienced, mind wanting it again and again because it has now desires to experience that pleasure again and again. And with that thing means you are doing something continuously, repeatedly, that thing becomes mechanical. And at that time, those memories are being ruled. Those memories are ruling your mind. Of course, memory has a place at a certain level. In every life, in everyday life, we could not function at all without it. In its own field, it must be efficient, but there is a state of mind where it has very little place. A mind which is not crippled by memory has real freedom. This is very important. A mind which is not crippled by memory has real freedom. Why this is important? Because I think what I'm understanding from here, because of all the memories, that's why we say no, that we are living in past. It's mean what is past? Past is a collection of memories. And if my mind is all the time occupied by memories, it's mean I'm living in past. And in past, what is there? Either pain or pleasure. I'm appreciating the pleasure part that I enjoyed all those things. I am hating the pain part that these things shouldn't have happened, then that would be much better, or those things should not repeat in my life. It's me, I'm choosing there what is pleasure and that and between pleasure and pain. At that time my mind is all the time occupied by memories, and in future at the moment I am judging everything on the basis of those memories. So, have you ever noticed that when you respond to something totally with all your heart, there is very little memory? When you notice you respond to something totally with your heart, there is very little memory. Why? Because if the memory is less, it's mean judgments are less. If judgment are less, then the response from your side will be in totality, not in partial sense. It is only when you do not respond to a challenge with your whole being that there is a conflict, a struggle, and this brings confusion and pleasure or pain. When we are responding with memories, this creates, why this is happening? Because there is conflict between your thoughts that I should choose this thing or this thing. And why you are choosing? With the help of memory, you are just analyzing that it is going to give you pain or pleasure, this thing. So that's why you are never being whole any moment to enjoy or see the life as it is. And the struggle breeds memory. That memory is added to all the time by other memories, and it is those memories which respond. Anything that is result of memory is old and therefore never free. There is no such thing as freedom of thought. It is sheer nonsense. So thought can never be free because every thought that you have is always bounded by your memories. It is being, every thought is being judged or I will say recycled by your memories. And memories is what? Is just your experience, good or bad, pleasure and pain. So whatever thoughts you have, all of them are judgmental thoughts. And anything which is judgmental, which has been judged by some memories that you have, can never be free. So there is no such thing as freedom of thoughts. Thoughts, thought is never new. For thought is the response of memory, experience, knowledge. Thought, because it is old, makes this thing which you have looked at with delight and failed tremendously for the moment old. From the old you derive pleasure, never from the new. There is no time in the new. So if you can look at things, if you can look at all the things without allowing pleasure to creep it, at a face, a bird, the color of a sari, the beauty of a sheet of water shimmering in the sun, or anything that gives delight, if you look at it without wanting the experience to be repeated, then there will be no pain, no fear, and therefore tremendous joy. So here, why this thing JK is saying, without wanting the experience to be repeated. Without wanting the experience to be repeated, try to understand here one point. If I am wanting that whatever experience I am having at the moment, which is giving me delight, pleasure, but I don't want, I'm not associating myself that it should be repeated again and again. If it is being repeated, I have no problem. But JK here is saying, I'm not wishing that it should be repeated. Why? Because the desire will be there if you are wanting something to be repeated. If you are wanting that it should not be repeated, it is also a desire. And with the desires, there will always be pleasure and pain associated. So JK here is saying, whatever things you are looking, the face, bird, color of sari, or whatever things you are just enjoying at the moment, never wish for its repetition. Otherwise, it will bring fear. Like for example, I did good in business this month. For example, if I wish that it should be repeated each and every month, it is bringing me fear. Why fear? Because I'm afraid that what if it is not repeated again? What if my business goes down? And because of this fear, I am associating myself with the pain. Why? Because if next month my business is not doing well, it is giving me pain. Try to understand this thing. It will make you crippled. So, it is the struggle to repeat and perpetuate pleasure which turns it into pain. Watch it in yourself. The very demand for the repetition of pleasure brings about pain because it is not the same as it was yesterday. You struggle to achieve the same delight, not only to your aesthetic sense, but the same inward quality of the mind. And you are hurt and disappointed because it is denied to you. The same thing that we are discussing, you struggle to achieve the same delight again and again. For example, what you wanted to be repeated, and if it is not repeating, then it is giving you disappointment because that pleasure that you was wishing, that you was wanting to be repeated has been denied to you. Have you observed what happens to you when you are denied a little pleasure? When you don't get what you want, you become anxious, envious, hateful. Have you noticed when you have been denied the pleasure of drinking or smoking or sex or whatever it is? Have you noticed what battles you go through? And all that is form of fear, isn't it? You are afraid of not getting what you want or of losing what you have. When some particular faith or ideology give you which you have held for years is shaken or torn away from you by logic or life, aren't you afraid of standing alone? That belief has for years given you satisfaction and pleasure, And when it is taken away, you are left standard. You are left stranded, empty, and the fear remains until you find another form of pleasure, another belief. That's why you will see that it is very hard. For example, any person who is following some particular religion in your society, you will see. Suppose that he or she finds some problem in that religion, and that person is not wishing or not wanting to remain in that religious group. He or she left that religion, but that person will try to associate himself or herself with some another religion, with some other ideology. Why? Because the previous religion was giving that person some pleasure. Now that person is missing that thing, so he or she will associate himself or herself with some other religion, so that the continuity of that pleasure, for that continuity of pleasure. It seems to me, JK says, it seems to me so simple, and because it is so simple, we refuse to see its simplicity. We like to complicate everything. When your wife turns away from you, aren't you jealous? Aren't you angry? Don't you hate the man who has attracted her? And what is all that but fear of losing something which has given you a great deal of pleasure? A companionship, a certain quality of assurance, and the satisfaction of possession. This is very important, and this is very practical, man. So here JK is pointing out, like for example, in place of wife, suppose that you have a girlfriend. So in your college or in your life, you must have felt it. If that girl is talking to some another boy, you feel anxious, you feel jealous. Why? What is the reason? She is simply talking to someone else. Because you are afraid, you have the fear that what if she dissociate herself with you and she goes with that person. Now what you have? You had the possession of her. Now it is in danger. That her companionship is giving you some assurance and some pleasure. But now that companionship is in danger. So you are afraid here of losing her. You are afraid of losing that companionship, that possession. So it's all the fear. So if you understand that where there is a search of pleasure, there must be pain. Live that way if you want to, but don't just slip into it. If you want to end pleasure, thought, though, which is to end pain, you must be totally attentive the whole structure of pleasure, not cut it out as monks and sannyasis do, never looking at a woman because they think it is a sin and therefore thereby destroying the vitality of their understanding, but seeing the whole meaning and significance of pleasure. Then you will have tremendous joy in life. You can't think of joy. You can't think about joy. Joy is an immediate thing. And by thinking about it, you turn it into pleasure. Very important line. Once again, we will read. You will have tremendous joy in life. You cannot think about joy. Joy is an immediate thing, and by thinking about it, you turn it into pleasure. Why this is important line? Because if you are thinking, suppose that you are feeling a joy, and now you started thinking about this joy, what happens at that time? You are thinking means you are creating some scenario that okay, this joy should be repeated again and again. I want it again and again. You want to create that joy as your memory, and at that time you have given a desire for that joy, and now that joy has become pleasure for you, and you want that pleasure again and again. And with that demand, with that desire, you just invited pain along with that demand for pleasure. So JK says living in the present is the instant perception of beauty and the great delight in it without seeking pleasure from it. So this is the end. JK in the end says We have to live in present for instant perception of beauty and the great delight in it without seeking pleasure from it. And if you will stop seeking pleasure from it, it's mean you have stopped demanding its repetition. You are not capturing it as a memory. You are just living the moment. You enjoyed that pleasure, you enjoyed that joy, that's all. The things that moment will pass, the experience will pass, everything, and you are not associating with it. You are not associating yourself with it. You are not demanding anything that it should be repeated again. So this is the way to live your life in joyful sense. So I hope you like this session. In the next video, we will complete chapter 5 from the freedom from the known. So I'm thankful that you listened till here. My voice reached to you. See you in the next video. Till then, stay healthy, stay happy. Peace.